Thanks very much, Aaron. Yeah. This is by no means an exegesis on the particular portions of scriptures that I'm going to bring to you this afternoon. It's just a few thoughts, really. And we're going to start in Luke's Gospel. And then hopefully it'll just lead on to various aspects of what I hope to say. So what had happened was that we all know in the scriptures that Jesus had gone through the wilderness and he'd gone 40 days and 40 nights, and at the end he was tempted by Satan. And there was a discourse about what happened there. And then after that, he went to Nazareth. And he went into the synagogue, and the scroll was passed to him from Isaiah. And he read it, and the people were absolutely, this guy's great. Who can speak like this? Nobody spoke like this before. And then he dropped a bombshell on the people in the synagogue by saying, "Surely you quote this proverb to me, 'Physician, heal yourself.' And you will tell me, 'Do here in your own town what you did in Capernaum.' Truly I tell you," Jesus continued, "no prophet is accepted in his hometown. I assure you that there are many widows in Israel in Elijah's time, when the sky was shut for 3.5 years, and there was a severe famine throughout the land. Yet Elijah was not sent to any of them, but to a widow in Zarephath in the region of Sidon. And there were many in Israel with leprosy in the time of Elisha, the prophet, yet not one of them was cleansed, only Naaman, the Syrian." All the people in the synagogue were furious when they heard this. They got up and drove him out of the town and took him to the brow of the hill on which there was built. And then they went to throw him off the cliff. But Jesus, being the Son of God, just walked through them, out of the midst of them. I read that particular portion there because he mentioned Elisha, the prophet, and Naaman, the Syrian. And it is basically taken from 2 Kings chapter 5. And all of the chapter is a narrative of what happened. Basically, in a condensed version, what happened was Naaman, who was a commander in the Syrian army, he had leprosy. Now, in the second verse of chapter, it says that there was a young girl, who was taken captive by the Syrians, and she said to his wife, Naaman's wife, that there's a prophet in Samaria, and that the prophet would heal him. So Naaman went to the king to ask permission to go to Israel, and the king permitted him to go, and he wrote a letter to the king of Israel. Now, there's a bit of a mix-up here. Naaman took the letter to the king of Israel, asking the king to heal him. Well, there was a bit of a misunderstanding, and the king went into a bit of a rage, and anyway, Elisha found out about it, and Elisha said to the king, "Send him over here, and I'll prove to him that there's a prophet in Israel." So Naaman goes to Elisha's house, but Elisha didn't come out, but he sent his servant Gehazi, and he said to him, "I want you to go to the river Jordan and dive in 7 times, and after that, you'll be as well as can be." Well, this time, Naaman went into a rage, and he said, "You're absolutely joking." I mean, it wasn't as bad as the River Tees, was it? I mean, there was no pollution in them days. I mean, fancy criticising the River Jordan, but Anyway, so he went into a rage and he said, I'm not doing it. He said, there's better rivers in Babylon, Damascus rather, so I'm going to go there. So anyway, his servant came out to him and said, look, Naaman, he said, if he'd asked you to do something hard, you'd have done it. And Naaman come round and he said, all right, I'll do it. And but you see, Naaman was expecting to go down. You know, these spiritual aspirations that we have. He said, you'd think that he would have come out and laid hands on me or waved his hands about like a prophet, you know. But that wasn't to be. So anyway, the amazing thing was that this actually worked, this jumping in the seven. Now, people actually do that today, you know. They think if I do things 7 times, it's a magic number and things are bound to happen. Like walking around the walls of Jericho, you know, and we tend to think in terms of 7. We're a bit frightened of 6, I think, as well. But the amazing thing was that after this, he was cleansed, that Naaman was converted. And converted to Judaism, well, not Judaism, but to the Lord, to Yahweh. So he goes back to Elisha and says to Elisha this time, look, this is great stuff. Let me give you a bit of lucre. Elisha wouldn't have anything. He said, no, it's free. So he said, can I take some soil back to Syria so that I can worship near your land, as it were? Oh, yes, yeah, you can take as much soil as you want. So he filled up his mule and went back. So anyway, you know the story. Gehazi, Elisha's servant, came back to Naaman on his way back to Syria and said, Naaman, look, about that reward, you couldn't give me a bit of this money stuff, yeah? Well, yeah, sure, yeah, there you are, as much as you want. So he takes it back and he hides it. But then he went back to Elisha's house, and Elisha, he knew what had gone on. And he said, where have you been? Oh, I've just been hanging around, you know, nothing special. He said, yes, you have, you little tinker. You've been to Naaman, haven't you? And you got some money off him. Oh, yeah, well, and you know the story that the leprosy was passed on to Gehazi. There's some great things you can bring out of that particular thing, but I've named the heading Healings. Now then, the Lord Jesus healed many people in various ways, as we know. The mighty power of God was upon him. And in Matthew 8:3, there was a leper, and he came out to Jesus, and Jesus touched the leper. It's a thing that people really didn't do in Israel, because to touch leprosy, you could actually catch it. So Jesus healed him. Then there was another occasion in John 5:8 where Jesus just spoke. He said, take up your bed and walk. And he was healed. And then we read in Mark 7:33. So when Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre, he went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee, into the region of Decapolis. There were some people who brought a man to him who was deaf and could hardly talk. And they begged Jesus to lay his hand on him. After he took him aside, away out of the crowds, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ear. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. And he looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said, Ephitara, means be opened. At this, the man's ears were opened and his tongues were loosed and began to speak. Yes, indeed, praise God. And then again, in Mark just a little bit further on, 8:23. There's another occasion. They came to Bethsaida, and some of the people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man and led him by the hand outside the village. That's the second time where Jesus took him outside the village. And when he had spit on the man's eyes, he put his hands on him, and Jesus said, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people," and they looked like trees walking around. Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Now then, if you could bring that up to modern day, and you could look at the way that Jesus did things, and just supposing that there was a village and they heard of a new man had just come to stay in the village, and the man from the Touchy Church and the man from the Speak of the Word Church came up and said, "Excuse me, we've heard that you've been healed by Jesus." Yes, I've been healed by Jesus. "Well, would you like to come to our service next week and tell everybody how the Lord touched you?" Well, what do you mean? He didn't touch me. "Well, what do you do? What do you do?" "Well, he just spoke the word." "You mean he didn't touch you?" No. "Are you sure you're healed?" "Yeah." He said, well, what did he do for you then?" "Well, he does what he does all the time." "What did he do?" He said, "He spat in my eyes." "Wow," he said, "that's a new one." So the first person would go away and form a church called a Touchy Church. The second one would go away and form a church, call it the Church of the Word. And then this other guy, he would come along and form another church and call it the Church of the Holy Spittle. And there was another occasion where in John chapter 9, verse 6, where Jesus actually healed a man blind from birth, and he spat, but he missed, and the spittle went on the ground. So he made some mud out of the saliva and put it on the man's eyes and told him to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. So we can't put God into any sort of bracket. We can't chain him down into what we want him to be. He does things in a unique way. He did what he did for Naaman out of the grace of God. He loves the Gentiles. In fact, in Isaiah, it was promised that he would be Lord of the Gentiles. But just to finish on one thing from the 2 Kings chapter 5, it's the young girl's testimony. Surely this is a remarkable thing. We've been witnessing lately on the television, haven't we, where people who are being captured by the, I was going to say Assyrians there, but it was the Gazans, and these people are just starting to be freed now. But this young girl, she'd been taken from her environment, and yet she was able to say to Naaman's wife and actually care for Naaman by telling her to go and seek help from this prophet. And he wasn't turned away. But thank God for the testimony of that young girl. That's all it takes, just a word to encourage people in the things of God. And so I just leave you with that thought, that we can also be witnesses in the simplest of ways without any sort of trying to impress people. Just a simple word, what's on our hearts. Thanks very much.